I never thought owning a quiet little vineyard on the edge of town would land me in the middle of a war. I'm not a troublemaker by nature. I'm a widower, 66 years old, and most days my only company is a couple of golden retrievers and the hum of my old tractor. But when you own land that looks like it should be under HOA control, even if it's not, you'd better believe someone's gonna try and rope you in. And in my case, that someone was a woman named Karen Prescott, president of the Sycamore Heights HOA, queen of clipped hedges and passive-aggressive newsletters, and soon to be the biggest thorn in my side since the wine beetle infestation of 2014. My name's Samuel Decker. Folks just call me Sam. I've lived on this vineyard, Hilltop Vineyards, for over 30 years, planted every vine with my own two hands, pruned them through droughts and hailstorms, bottled my own red and white blends for the local market. The land's mine outright, clear deed, paid off, borders surveyed 3 times over. Never once been part of Sycamore Heights, which popped up 10 years ago when some developer carved up land behind my back pasture and built a bunch of cookie-cutter homes with postage stamp lawns and people who seemed to think neighborhood meant tiny kingdom. It started small, like these things do. A note left on my gate. No signature, just typed. Your barn's color violates our architectural standards. Please repaint to HOA beige. I laughed. Thought it was a joke. My barn's a deep cherry red, classic Americana, nothing offensive about it. But a week later, there was another letter, this time certified mail. As per HOA regulations, outdoor structures must be approved by the board. Failure to comply may result in fines. I took the letter down to City Hall, along with my deed and a thermos of black coffee. The clerk chuckled, pulled up the parcel maps, and confirmed what I already knew. My property sat outside Sycamore Heights boundary lines, not even on their same grid. I left that office satisfied, feeling like it was over. But Karen wasn't done. Next came the courtesy inspections. A couple of clipboard-wielding board members parked their hybrid SUV right outside my fence and started taking photos of my vines, my compost bins, even my dogs. When I stepped out to ask what the hell they were doing, they gave me the fakest smiles I've ever seen and said they were assessing visual encroachments. I ain't encroaching on anything except my own peace, I told them. One of them, a jittery fellow named Dale, muttered something about setting precedent. Now I've seen enough in my day to know when someone's gearing up for a fight. This wasn't about property lines. This was about control. And folks like Karen, they don't take kindly to people who don't fall in line. But I still didn't expect the sheriff's cruiser to pull up on a Wednesday morning in April, right as I was bottling a fresh batch of Syrah. I wiped my hands on my apron and met the 2 deputies at the gate. "Mr. Decker?" one of them asked, polite but tense. "We got a report of unpermitted agricultural activity and unauthorized fencing. We need to take a look." "From who?" I asked. He didn't answer directly, just tapped his notepad and said, "Complainant is listed as Sycamore Heights Neighborhood Authority." I nearly choked. "There is no such authority," I said, "and this land's private. You got a warrant?" They didn't. To their credit, they didn't press, but they took notes, looked around, and said they'd follow up. I offered them some bottled water. They declined, drove off slow. That night, I sat on the porch and looked out over the hills, the vines swaying in the breeze like nothing was wrong. But something was wrong. That HOA thought they could take me down with enough pressure. They figured an old man with a vineyard and no HOA membership would fold under paperwork and threats. But they underestimated 2 things. 1, I'm not afraid of a fight when the land I love is on the line. And 2, I kept every receipt, every deed, every legal map. And I had a lawyer who owed me a favor from way back. Still, that was only the beginning. The next move Karen made would cross a line no neighbor should ever cross. And that's when I stopped playing defense and started planning my counterattack. You'd think after calling the cops on me, Karen would have backed off. But people like her don't stop when you tell them no. They take no as a challenge, as if decency were optional and the rest of us were obstacles in their HOA-themed video game. So when I got a bright orange notice zip-tied to my vineyard gate just 2 days after the sheriff visit, I knew it was time to stop sipping wine and start loading ammunition, legal of course. The paper read, Notice of Lien. Delinquent HOA dues, 4,312 bahs, 79 dines, payable to Sycamore Heights HOA within 15 days to avoid further legal action. I stared at it, blinking. A lien? I wasn't even a member. Never signed anything. Never bought into that HOA community. But there it was, in black and white, with my name and address. And that amount? That was no random number. It included accumulated annual dues, violation fees, and a compliance processing charge. It even itemized the red barn nonconformity and unauthorized grape trellis density. Now, I ain't no lawyer, but I'm not stupid either. This wasn't a mistake. It was fabrication. Someone was manufacturing paperwork and hoping I'd be too old or too overwhelmed to fight back. But instead of panicking, I went to my safe. Inside were the original property records, the plat maps from 1987, and a dusty manila folder labeled HOA Refusal, signed from back when Sycamore Heights was first proposed. I'd refused to sell, refused to join. That document, witnessed and notarized, legally excluded me from ever be a HOA. Then annexed into their HOA. It was my golden ticket. I smiled as I pulled it out. Karen had just handed me the rope she was going to hang herself with. But before I made my move, I called Hank Brewster, my old friend, now a semi-retired real estate lawyer living in the next county. Hank had helped me negotiate a vineyard contract years back, and I'd once helped him fix a busted fence line during a thunderstorm. We were square, but we respected each other. Sam, he said, after reading the scanned documents I emailed over, this is illegal as hell. I figured. They're either bluffing or they're committing mail fraud, maybe both. I want to bury them, Hank. There was a long pause. Then he said, then we'll need to dig. What we uncovered over the next week could have filled a whole library shelf. Turns out Sycamore Heights had been attempting to expand its control quietly, bullying adjacent property owners with scare tactics and legal-sounding threats. Most folks gave in, especially elderly folks who didn't want the hassle. Karen had even added buffer parcels to their map, plots of land she claimed were influenced by HOA visual policy. And there, right on her digital map, sat my vineyard, shaded in HOA gray. I marched right down to the county recorder's office. The clerk was a young gal named Ruby, barely old enough to rent a car, but she had a sharp eye. She pulled up the official land records, then the Sycamore Heights filings. Well, this here's interesting, she said, scrolling. They submitted a supplemental plat last year claiming to include Hilltop Vineyards, but it wasn't approved. In fact, it was rejected. Rejected and still used? I asked. She nodded, chewing her lip. Looks like they went ahead and updated their HOA website and materials anyway. That's misrepresentation. Oh, I'd say it's more than that. I had copies made of everything. I whistled, went home with a folder full of evidence and fire in my belly. But before I could act, Karen made her boldest move yet. It was a Thursday morning when I found the gate to my vineyard locked from the outside. A shiny new padlock and chain wound through the bars like I was being foreclosed on, and stuck to the gate was a laminated sign that read, Property under HOA enforcement hold. Do not enter until compliance is verified. My blood pressure must have jumped 20 points. My dogs barked like they'd caught wind of a fox. I stood there in stunned silence for a moment, then calmly walked back to my barn, grabbed a pair of bolt cutters, and snapped that chain like it was a twig. I tossed the lock in the trash and the sign into the fire pit. But Karen was already waiting. She showed up 10 minutes later in a powder blue Lexus, her giant sunglasses perched like hawkeyes above her clipboard. She didn't even have the decency to come to the porch. She parked right outside the fence and shouted, You're in violation of enforcement protocol." I stepped up to the gate, arms crossed. "This is my land. That gate, my property. You locked me out of my own vineyard." "You're operating in open defiance of the HOA," she said, flipping through her notes. "Our jurisdiction includes visual and environmental impact, and your non-conforming structures affect community resale values." "You're trespassing," I said flatly. She blinked. "Excuse me? You entered private land, tampered with my gate, and posted fraudulent signage. You're on video. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Her mask cracked for a second. She paled. Then, trying to recover her usual flair, she said, "You'll be hearing from our legal team as well." I smiled. Good. They'll be hearing from the county recorder too, and the sheriff, and the DA's office, once I file. That shook her. She climbed back into her Lexus with trembling hands, engine revving too fast. I waved her off like a rancher waves off a stray coyote. The next day, real fireworks began. Karen filed a formal injunction to freeze operations on my vineyard, claiming I was in violation of community governance standards. But she made a mistake, a big one. She attached a map, and that map, intended to prove her case, included a forged signature. Mine. I'd seen a lot in my day. Twisters, wildfires, even a copperhead curled up in my boot. But I'd never seen my own signature forged on a legal document. And that's what made my hands shake, not with fear, but with fury. See, when someone lies to your face, it's one thing, but when they lie to the courts in your name, that's war. I sat at my kitchen table, the document spread out in front of me, under the yellow light of a hanging bulb. Karen had submitted it with her injunction paperwork, an amended HOA expansion agreement, supposedly signed by me in 2021, complete with notary stamps. My name, my address, a scrawl at the bottom that was supposed to be my signature. But here's the thing, I haven't signed anything since 2019 when I broke my hand fixing the post digger. The break never healed right, and my signatures looked different ever since. This fake? It looked like my old one, like someone copied it from an old document. And suddenly, I remembered something from years ago. Back when Sycamore Heights first approached me about joining the HOA, I'd given Karen a tour of the edge of my land, just to be polite. She'd asked to see the property lines, and I showed her the original survey and refusal papers. I'd even let her glance at the deed copy. She never gave them back, claimed she wanted to discuss with the board. She must have kept them all this time. I called Hank, my lawyer, first thing that morning. "She forged a document," I said, "not just fake, forged." He let out a low whistle. "You ready to press charges?" "I'm ready to bury her." Hank contacted the county clerk, the sheriff's office, and the DA. I drove straight to the sheriff's department with the documents in hand, a hard copy of my actual signature history, and a certified letter from my doctor confirming the hand injury that altered my writing. The deputy at the desk listened patiently, then said, "Wait here." 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a glass-walled office with Sheriff Glenn Maddox himself. Glenn and I went way back. He was a rookie when I first met him. These days, he walked like a man who'd seen too much and smiled too little. "You sure about this, Sam?" he asked, flipping through the paperwork. "Positive, that's not my signature, and that's not a legal map. She's faked her way into filing an injunction, locked me out of my own land. She's got to be stopped." He leaned back in his chair. "We've had other complaints about Sycamore Heights, mostly neighbor stuff, but nothing like this. This?" He tapped the document. "This is a felony." I nodded. "Then it's time someone treated it like one." Within 48 hours, Karen got served. A sheriff's deputy showed up at her precious HOA board meeting, where she was lecturing the neighbors on fence uniformity standards, and handed her a court summons for fraud, forgery, and misrepresentation. Witnesses said she turned red, then white, then green, like a stoplight breaking down in front of everyone. But she wasn't done. Oh no. Because just 2 days later, I got another visit. Two unmarked sedans pulled up outside my gate. Out stepped a man in a gray suit and a woman with a state badge. They were from the state licensing board for property associations. Someone had forwarded them the documents from my case. Turns out Karen had not been properly renewing her credentials. And worse, she'd been operating the HOA with expired insurance, using a personal checking account for administrative dues, and, get this, charging homeowners double fees, then pocketing the overage. They interviewed me for an hour. I showed them the videos from my security cameras, Karen locking my gate, her screaming about visual encroachment, even her threatening my dogs once when they barked at her Prius. The agents left, shaking their heads, muttering things like audits and criminal mismanagement, and just when I thought it couldn't get any better, it did. Because, remember Ruby, the young county clerk? She called me one morning, all excited. "Mr. Decker," she said, "you might want to come down here. We found something." When I got there, she handed me an old, dusty microfiche printout from 1994. It was the original covenant agreement that created Sycamore Heights HOA, and there, in tiny legal print, was a clause no one had ever enforced. Any expansion of HOA territory must be approved unanimously by current property owners adjacent to proposed boundary lines. That included me, and I'd never approved anything. Which meant, every attempt Karen made to expand into my vineyard or any of the neighboring farms she bullied over the years, all of it was invalid. Every fine, every notice, every lien. I took that clause and drove straight to Hank's office, his grin stretched like a kid on Christmas morning. "This," he said, holding up the paper like it was a sword, "is how we kill a queen." Hank filed a civil suit within the week. Fraud, harassment, property interference, unauthorized lien placement, emotional distress, and trespassing. We demanded restitution, public apology, and dissolution of any mention of Hilltop Vineyards in HOA records. And to make it more fun, we filed a class action suit too, on behalf of 4 other neighbors Karen had tried to bully. Word spread like wildfire. The HOA board panicked. Some quit on the spot. Dale, the jittery clipboard guy, accusations. Ellie came to my porch to apologize in person, said he had no idea what Karen was really up to. Offered to testify. I gave him a beer and said, "You do that, Karen?" She went dark, didn't show up to the next HOA meeting, disconnected her landline, even put her house up for sale off market. But I knew it wasn't over yet, because the court date was coming, and I had a front row seat. Courtrooms are funny places. The air's always too cold, the chair's too hard, and yet somehow the tension still makes you sweat. I'd been in one only a handful of times, once for jury duty, once after a land dispute in the 90s, but nothing like this. This wasn't just about land anymore. This was about pride, about principle, about standing up to a woman who'd built an empire out of fear and paperwork and was now watching it all crack at the foundation. Karen showed up in a beige pantsuit like she was attending a business conference, not a fraud hearing. Her hair was pulled so tight it looked like it hurt to blink. She had 2 lawyers with her, slick, city types with too much gel and not enough soul. Meanwhile, I sat next to Hank Brewster in my worn denim jacket and a bolo tie my late wife gave me on our last anniversary. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to finish it. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Margaret Connors, opened proceedings. Case 117B, Samuel Decker versus Sycamore Heights Homeowners Association and Karen Prescott, representing party. First came the forged signature. Hank presented the forged annexation document, the original 1987 plat map, and the medical affidavit about my hand injury. Then he rolled out a beautiful bit of theater. A handwriting expert we'd flown in from Denver, who testified that the signature on the HOA filing was 99.9% inconsistent with my current writing and almost certainly copied from a prior document. Karen's lawyers objected, twice, but were overruled. Then came the kicker. Hank pulled out the HOA charter from 1994, the one Ruby had found. He walked the judge through the clause about unanimous adjacent property owner approval. Then he showed a map of the HOA's expansion plans, which included my vineyard, Old Man Harris's cornfield, and 2 other parcels that had never signed anything. "Your Honor," Hank said, pointing to the map, "this HOA's expansion was built on sand. Not one adjacent landowner signed off. Every lien, every fine, every letter they sent Mr. Decker was fraudulent. Worse, they tampered with county property filings and locked him out of his own land. This is not just harassment, it's a coordinated abuse of power." Karen's face was a roadmap of melting confidence. She tried to interrupt, but the judge held up her hand. "You'll get your turn, Ms. Prescott." Then it really went sideways for her. Because next up was Dale, the clipboard guy, called as a surprise witness. He took the stand, adjusted his tie, and said, "I didn't know what Karen was doing at first. I thought we were just expanding for better landscaping control, but she had me collect signatures under false pretenses, told me we were petitioning for road repairs. I found out later she filed those with the county as annexation approvals. I never would have helped if I'd known." Karen turned in her seat and glared at him like he'd stabbed her. Dale avoided her eyes. The judge made notes, her pen scratching louder than the ceiling fan. Then came the finance audit. Oh Lord. One of the agents from the state licensing board testified via Zoom. She displayed records of Karen's personal bank transactions, ones that showed she'd been depositing HOA overages into an account shared with her sister-in-law. "We estimate upwards of $87,000 in misappropriated funds over a 4-year period," the agent said, "including duplicate fee collection, cash-only fines, and administrative donations that were never accounted for." Karen tried to speak again. The judge finally let her. She stuttered, trembling, and said, "This is a misunderstanding. I've been working for the good of the community. I wasn't stealing. I was organizing. I improved property values. That vineyard is an eyesore, and I was just trying to bring it up to standard." The courtroom laughed. Even the judge smirked before composing herself. "Ms. Prescott," she said, "I've presided over 30 HOA cases in my career. Yours is the most egregious abuse of position I've seen. You forged documents, filed fraudulent liens, tampered with property, and weaponized your authority. I'm referring this for criminal prosecution. Civil damages will be determined shortly." I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was tired. You don't come out of a war like this grinning. You come out bruised, older, and aware of just how deep people's hunger for control can go. Still, justice felt good. 3 weeks later, the civil court awarded me $62,000 in damages, plus an injunction preventing Sycamore Heights from ever referencing my vineyard again in any legal documents or maps. But the real win, Karen was stripped of her HOA presidency, fined by the state, and banned from participating in any property management organization for 10 years. Her Lexus, repossessed. Her house, sold at a loss after word got out. Her reputation, dust in the wind. And here's the best part. The HOA dissolved 6 months later. Turns out, without Karen at the helm, nobody wanted the job. The board fractured, fines disappeared, people stopped paying dues, and the county eventually absorbed the roads and services. Freedom bloomed like wildflowers through the cracks of her failed kingdom. There's a certain quiet that returns after a storm, the kind that settles in your bones like a warm blanket. That's how it felt walking through my vineyard the morning after the HOA officially dissolved. No notices on my gate, no strangers with clipboards, just rows of green, dew-kissed vines and a breeze that smelled like freedom. It had been 6 months since the courtroom showdown, and 6 months since Karen's kingdom fell, Her Lexus was towed, and her smug little empire collapsed into suburban silence. And me? I was still here, still pruning, still bottling, still living the life I chose, not the one she tried to force on me. Neighbors who'd once avoided me out of fear started showing up with pies and folded lawn chairs. Old man Harris brought over 2 crates of corn and a bottle of moonshine so strong it could take paint off a tractor. Dale, yes, that Dale, offered to help me fix the fence line between our properties. Said it was time someone made things right. I accepted. Because bitterness, while easy, makes for poor soil. And I've always believed in planting better things. One Saturday evening in late September, just as harvest was wrapping up, I hosted what I called the Freedom Vintage Party. I uncorked a special batch of Syrah I'd been saving for over a decade, pulled out my old grill, and fired up a mess of ribs. Folks came from all over, neighbors, friends, even Ruby from the county clerk's office. We sat under the stars on folding chairs and hay bales, laughing, clinking glasses, and remembering the chaos with the kind of humor only hindsight allows. Someone asked me if I missed the drama, if life felt too quiet now. I looked out at the vineyard, all lit up with string lights, and said, "Quiet is a gift, but peace? Peace is earned." And that was the truth of it. Because Karen wasn't just a woman with too much time and a clipboard. She was a symbol of something bigger, this creeping idea that everything and everyone should fit into neat little rules, that we should all look the same, act the same, live the same. But life doesn't grow like that. Not on a farm, not on a vineyard, and sure as hell not in a free country. Her downfall wasn't just a personal victory. It was a stand against that mindset. One that says people like me, old, stubborn, independent, don't belong unless we comply. Well, I didn't comply. And now? I don't have to. There was one last bit of poetic justice that came weeks later. I got a call from the county. Turns out Karen had tried to sue the HOA board members who remained, claiming they failed to defend her in court. The judge tossed it out in 5 minutes. No one came to support her, not a single neighbor. The woman who once controlled an entire community through fear couldn't even gather a witness. They say she moved 3 counties over, bought a condo. No HOA. Ironic, ain't it? As for me, I named that year's vintage Karen's Regret. It's got a bold taste, a sharp finish, and just the right amount of bitterness. Local stores can't keep it on the shelves. Folks say it pairs well with barbecue and revenge. Life, I've learned, has a funny way of coming full circle. I may be older now, slower, but when I sit on my porch with a glass of my own wine in hand, dogs at my feet, and the sunset draping gold across the vines, I don't think about the battles. I think about the land, the quiet, and the satisfaction of knowing that when push came to shove, I stood my ground, and won. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around. I've got more wild HOA tales coming your way.